Not Quite
Darkness
is a podcast that contains spoilers, opinions, and general...
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you so much for tuning into a special presentation of Not Quite Darkness. My name is Keith Brooks, and with me, as always, is Chad Dowdy. Chad, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And you are not kidding, Keith. Very special. Very special presentation.
Did we have an interview lined up for you that's going to make you scream? And it's not Jared Fogle from Subway. That would make us scream as well. What a weird joke. What a weird pull. Weird...
I thought you were going to say Nev Campbell, but nope.
Totally. I would scream in a very different way if Nev was on. I can't even talk now. I lost blood from my brain. Chad, tell them who we're interviewing.
We are interviewing the reason for this podcast, Not Quite Darkness. We are interviewing the director of the In Search of Darkness series, David Weiner. He will be on the show. And if you will recall, Keith, back in the Friday the 13th episode, I said, who knows? He may be on the show. Well, guess what? I'm a prophet. I was right. He's on the show, guys.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and bring him in, and we'll see you guys. We'll see how we fuck up and get canceled. Let's see what happens. Here we go. And ladies and gentlemen, with this special presentation of Not Quite Darkness, we are excited to present to you a special guest. Here with us today, we have the reason we are doing this, forgive my French, fucking podcast in of itself. We have filmmaker, journalist, curator of nostalgia and pop culture. We have David Weiner himself. David, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. I appreciate you guys having me on. I've been enjoying listening to the your first couple entries on the long road ahead of covering all the films that are in Search of Darkness Part 1 and Part 2 and Part 3, if you're up for it. I'll come back when you guys look like Rip Van Winkle and see how you're doing.
Well, it's done wonders for you. You've curated all of these movies, plus others in Search of Tomorrow. I hear you're working on Search of Tomorrow too, and you're looking fantastic. And not only that, but also an executive editor, formerly of the iconic Famous Monsters of Filmland, worked for The Hollywood Reporter and LA Weekly, Entertainment Tonight online, and working in the film industry for years in various capacities, whether as a script doctor or a PA, assistant director, all of that stuff. I have to say, I have two podcasts that you are relevant to. This one, and I do a Full Moon podcast.
Oh, you do?
And I've got that you worked on Demonic Toys, Puppet Master 2, and Puppet Master 3.
Puppet Master 3, a little bit of Puppet Master 3 and a little bit of Netherworld and Demonic Toys as well. And my first job out of the gate, when I went to film school in Ithaca College, upstate New York, and then I headed my car west, drove cross country. And literally the first job I had, because my roommate was already working there, he was a film school roommate as well. He had a job at Full Moon Entertainment. And so I got a job as a runner there. And then I bounced around in all different positions and worked on a couple movies. And then I got on other movies and things like that. But my Full Moon experience was quite memorable for the time that I was there.
That's absolutely, I love it. And I'm not going to mince words. I love the fact that Full Moon can give us these cheesy, kind of at times shitty horror movies, but that's a part of what you're looking for, right? That's a part of the thing that makes those so unique and so wonderful. Here's my question for you, starting right off the bat. Coming from a world where you've worked your way through the inner workings of film, I also saw that you were a towel wrangler on Robert Zemeckis' Castaway. Doing all of that stuff, do you love more the making of films or the films themselves? Now that you've curated them and worked on them, where do you find yourself falling?
It's that's a great question, because I see them as two very different things that are very hard to choose from. You know, it's like because seeing the final product of any film, especially if it's not one that you've worked on, is just you get to be a passive observer to either be entertained or, criticize or what have you. It could be your next favorite thing, or it could be something that you dismiss. But we love movies. We all collectively, the three of us and everyone who's listening to this podcast, we love movies, when you're working on a film, it's the cliche, it's behind the magic curtain, it's like seeing the magician's tricks, all the things like that. When you are obsessed with film, you want to know how films are made. And then when you're on a film set and you're seeing how films are made, I don't want to mince words. It's not a disappointment, but it's a slog. Very long days, very hard to get on film sets, commercials, movies, TV, music videos. I bounced around all. I wanted to keep on working. That's why I did so many things, everything from being an AD to a production manager to a stand-in to a towel wrangler, But when you're sitting watching a film that you've actually worked on, it's like watching home movies. I worked on a Pierce Brosnan movie, an action movie called Live Wire. And it was an amazing experience. I really loved working with Pierce and everyone on the crew. I watched that movie and I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter what's happening on screen. I'm like, I remember that day at that location when we did this, or that didn't work, or what the challenges or the real fun stuff we did afterwards, on that movie. And so that's the long answer to, I can't quite pick one or the other because I love both. But I got to tell you, at a certain point, I did have to exit being an on-set production person because they're long days. It's a young man's game is all I could say. And I, 4 years in, I just saw myself not being able to do 15 to 20 hour days on a set, on location, or even on a soundstage. That's no one's future. It's very difficult.
It's a horror movie unto itself. I mean, it is, the hours, the quick turnaround, the being in strange climates and settings at all point. I work in the film industry as well, and it can be daunting just in general. But I love what you're saying because it's our memory scrapbooks that we're watching, you know what I mean? And those stories hit a different way because there's a narrative playing on the screen, but my narrative that I associated with it is how we got to that point, emotionally in the scene or whatever. But that brings me to another aspect of what has been a very, lauded career of yours, that you also, acted as a Hollywood entertainment journalist for a long time, interviewing huge stars and hearing a different perspective of those stories, almost a historiography of that stuff, whether it be Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, Mel Brooks with an award-winning interview, all of Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher breaking that news about the Star Wars reunion before Disney even announced it. What part of that excited you? Was it this idea of having always grown up loving films, or was it seeing behind the veil a little bit, or something else I can't even decipher yet?
Well, I think it's funny that that's your follow-up question, because I could easily connect it with the first question.
Yeah.
Once I went down that road, I always said, if I'm not going to be making my own movies, I'd want to be in entertainment. That's like my plan B is still to be in entertainment. So if I'm not making my own movies, I want to be writing about movies, or I want to be working in the milieu of a studio, or just something where I get to be part of this crazy business, which there's so much fun that's part of it. And so when I got into sort of the entertainment journalism track, for lack of a better word, I felt I really could apply the knowledge of having been on movie sets for 4 years and being in development, and I just understand that process. So I could ask a question. I mean, I remember it was very rewarding when I was at Famous Monsters, and it was a win just to be able to track down Kevin Bacon to stop and give me the time of day. And I talked to him for like 45 minutes about Tremors, for a piece I did on the anniversary of Tremors. And I think it was 25th anniversary. And what I remember very specifically, just being real proud of myself, not like, I'm so great, but I was able to connect with them on a level that a lot of journalists couldn't, because I could talk to them about what life is like on a set, and then how it's a family and like a traveling circus. And then when you know, the last day, you're like, I love you. We had so much time together. You're the best. You're the best. I guarantee you we'll see each other next weekend, and then you don't see
Never.
people for 5-10 years or never. And applying that to how do you feel like that, because you genuinely want to see these people and they genuinely are your friends, but then it's real difficult because you've got so much going on in your life and your busy career and what have you, that you can't connect with the people that you really had a kinship and a bond with.
Yeah.
And he could tell that I understood that. And he's just like, yeah, no, people don't really ask me that particular question. And we went into that. And that's something where I feel like I could pat myself on the back, because I'm like, you know, listen, I want to be able to ask questions that you as a performer will emotionally connect to, you know, and people will respond to a journalist who understands what the hell they're talking about beyond just the project that you're talking about. Like if there's a career or even offshoots that have nothing to do with their entertainment career trajectory, if you have done your homework and you could talk about things or make, you know, side remarks and tangential little comments about certain things, it really engages anyone who's sitting across from you. And that to me is a victory in terms of understanding good journalism, you know, in terms of getting, you know, genuine likability and great answers from people that you sit and talk with. So, and I'll shut up because I'm over talking. But that to me is ultimately what makes, whether it was Entertainment Tonight or Famous Monsters, but now the In Search of Darkness movies or In Search of Tomorrow, I am incredibly comfortable, and I truly love being able to talk to people who are in front of the camera and behind the camera, and just the creatives and the artists who were part of this whole era, because I think they feel seen when I talk to them. Because I really love it, and I can fanboy before and I can fanboy after, but at the time I want to be their friend and confidant, and that to me makes it a real fun job.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, an interesting thing you bring up is, you know, I sort of liken it to screenwriting or any sort of filmmaking, that we're often, when we're trying to tell a story, we're looking for an in. How do I get myself personally into the story? Through what lens am I telling it? And I think interviewing, sometimes to a degree, you're doing the same thing through journalism. What's my in to the subject matter, right? And I feel also with a vast majority of your work, you have this in that is so endearing because it truly comes off like you're a fan of all of the stuff you're talking about, whether it be through your blog, it came from a blog, or these documentaries. It seems like your passion is these things, these icons that you've grown up with, and that seems to span across the career, from the documentary filmmaker to the entertainment journalist and all of that stuff.
Before you even ask your question, I just thought of something that I just don't want to disappear. When I was in Entertainment Tonight, an opportunity came along. I can't remember which season it was. It was like the maybe 5th season, perhaps, of Mad Men. And the junket for Mad Men was coming up, and I loved Mad Men because I'd seen a couple episodes, but I was a new dad. I had no time to really watch it. And they're like, David, do you want to cover this junket? And I'm like, absolutely. And I just did in my head the math. I'm like, how much time do I have between now and the junket to binge watch all of Mad Men and not fall asleep and still be able to take care of my family? And I was very proud of myself, because when I arrived there, first of all, they're not allowed to even talk about anything. They're like, well, am I in that scene? I don't know. I can't say. They have to be so cagey because they're just like under contract. Their lips are sealed. So the first thing I did for everyone that I sat across with was I bought like mini bar sized Canadian clubs, which is the drink of, you know, John Hamm's, you know, drink of choice, you know, and I gave that to everybody at the beginning when I'd sit down with them, and I just say, just to get you through the junket, because I know you can't really talk a lot. I want to loosen you up a little bit.
Absolutely. I
And
wish more EPKs did that. That would be fantastic.
Well,
Well, Keith, I
Elizabeth
told you we
Moss,
should have sent him something. We
Yeah.
should have sent him some
Elizabeth
alcohol.
Moss accused me of raiding the minibar at the hotel. I'm like, I swear I bought these at Bevmo.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Well, that's a fun, way to do the job. And at the same time, all of this, making these documentaries, it's a job. It's part of your life. It's a part of your career. Is the drive to do the specific work that you've done just from love of these projects? And why is, according to your own words, being a curator of pop culture and nostalgia so important to you? Why are these things that you love so important to show the world?
I love these through and through ever since I was a whippersnapper. I mean, I was a kid who I was that kid who sat in front of the TV so much. My mom said, you got to go out and you got to play. I'm going to limit the time you're in front of the TV. But any other time that I could sit in front of that TV and watch everything that I could, the stuff that I gravitated to was Universal Monsters, Hammer Horror, Godzilla movies, Saturday morning cartoons. I grew up in East Coast in New York, and they had this thing called the 4:30 movie, which was pretty much my education, because that's where they would have these theme weeks. So they'd have like Planet of the Apes week, or they'd have Edgar Allan Poe week with Vincent Price, or they'd have, Monster Week, what have you. They'd have, I don't know, they wouldn't call it, but it was like a post-apocalyptic week, so they'd have like Soylent Green and, the Omega Man. And I cut my teeth on this stuff. And so I just I'm not a one genre guy. I'm a genre guy. And I love all sorts of filmmaking. And I don't say that I'm just this one thing, but I really ultimately gravitate to sci-fi, horror, fantasy, action above everything else, and if it's a hybrid, that much more the better. And so I've just always loved this stuff. And so I remember prior to me working at Entertainment Tonight, I remember thinking to myself, one day I need to get a job where I could use all this wasted pop culture trivia factoids rattling around in my head and get paid for them, or at least get an audience who gives a shit,
Yeah.
And so to me, I would not call myself a film historian. But I think I took film theory along with film production. I am in love with the craft of filmmaking, and I'm in love with the history of filmmaking. But I do have my sweet spot, and it's really just pretty much from the 60s through the 80s, probably the 90s as well, because I mean, I was alive and well and seeing every movie in the 90s. So I might as well throw in the 90s as well. But it's a certain sweet spot of curation that, as we're farther and farther, decades and decades away, people now who have just they whether it's an app, whether it's streaming, whether it's what have you, a whole younger generation is just it's overwhelming how much material is out there, how much content is out there. And they feel you'll see it on social media. Everyone apologizes for not having seen something when they want to enter the conversation, saying, I know, don't hate me, but I just saw whatever, Howling, E.T., American Werewolf, Alien, Pulp Fiction, Star Wars, all these things. Listen, you got to make the time at some point in your life, and there's so much competing for your attention. So to be a nostalgia curator or just a curator of genre film, and to help guide people, whether it's me or whether I'm pointing to great voices who really know their stuff.
Yeah.
That to me, I think is very important, just to help people decide and figure out what to see. And again, In Search of Darkness, trilogy, and In Search of Tomorrow, those weren't initially the reasons why. That wasn't the raison d'etre, but it's like, these are big curation vehicles to tackle a whole decade of hundreds of films, which is a very daunting task.
Yeah, you're telling us the guy's going to watch all of them. Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Keith mentioned all the jobs that you've had in the industry. To me, by far, the best is kind of what you are now, nostalgia curator. You just talked about it. That's the job I want. I love that. I think it's just like you said, there's so much content out there, you can't see it all. So, you're curating, you're giving us, the best stuff. I love it. Now, to dovetail on that, you said you're a genre guy. So we've already seen last In Search of Last Action Hero, In Search of Darkness, In Search of Tomorrow. So is there potential for In Search of Fantasy or something in the future maybe as well?
We do have at Creator VC, we have a variety of sort of irons in the fire. And we're getting to them as fast as we can as a small group of 10 people. Ooh, we're getting to them as fast as possible as a small group can,
Yeah.
We have a film called In Search of Legends that it's very much in the early stages. Because up next we have In Search of Tomorrow, part 2. That's what's next on the docket. And then we also have In Search of Darkness 90s. And both of those are going to be crowdfunding this year, and we're going to start working on those. But we want to keep on going. We want to go into the 90s. We want to go into the 70s. We want to touch on other genres. We're doing different approaches to content, like we're doing FPS, first person shooter. So we're getting into the video game realm. Robin Block, he's the maestro for all this stuff that we're doing at Creator VC. At a certain point, and this is still just in the works, In Search of Pixels, a larger
great. Yeah.
Look at just the video game boom, but we're also I'm working as an executive producer on Aliens Expanded, where rather than a wide look at a decade, we're taking a focused look on an individual epic, iconic film. And so Ian Nathan is directing that one.
That's awesome.
In Search of the Last Action Heroes, that Oliver Harper was the director of that. I think sometimes I get lumped in there as the director of that. I was a producer on it, but that's Oliver Harper's film through and through, and it's wonderful. And it kicked us off going to The Darkness and Tomorrow, and and on and on and on. But we want to do the best we can as fans, for fans, to make these really quality films that we all care about, and so rather than just churning them out, it's almost a bit frustrating for us, because there's only so much we could do as a limited group and keep the quality control and the creative vision pure. So we're doing a lot, but we're not doing it too fast, and so everyone's just got to be patient, and patience is appreciated.
Yeah. Well, plus you're accumulating so many different titles and talking about them. These are long form documentaries, which are incredible. So you want to take the time and the care to treat these subjects with respect. I personally want to see In Search of Saturday Morning Cartoons. I think that would be a lot of fun. But
say that really loud into the ether, because I want to see that too.
But here's my question for you. As you're curating these things, and I think it's, as an artist, to preserve our art is an important thing. So many lost films that I wish we could have seen or could have saved. How do you go about picking what movies to include? How do you go about selecting what I want to talk about now and what I don't really care about? You know what I mean?
Sure. It's sort of a progressive approach. When we first did the first In Search of Darkness, we did not know if we would be able to continue on. In fact, it wasn't the plan to be like, we're going to do this, then we're going to do part 2, part 3. That was the dream. But with the crowdfunded project, encapsulating an entire decade in one film, it already was going beyond what we initially expected, because we initially planned to make like a 2-hour documentary.
Yeah.
And that doubled in size, and that was entirely due to the requirements of the structure of the film, especially when you're doing chapters in between each year to break it up, to build a larger context of the discussion around there. So choosing the films was something where I was really struggling with. I'm a completist. I want it all in there, and that's just not possible, especially in round one. And I felt I would be raked over the coals if I didn't do a lot of the big hitters. you know, and the big hitters are not just one and done, you know, there's multiple sequels, you know. Friday the 13th takes up half of my movie, you know.
Right.
And so to be able to accommodate that, I wanted to make sure I also had a lot of great little eclectic movies in between, whether it's The Company of Wolves or Society. But a lot of the choices that ultimately end up in the final cut are relevant to the talent that I get to sit on camera
Sure.
and talk about this, you know. So it's like if I have Caroline Williams, you know, Stretch from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and she could talk about being in Stepfather 2 and her death scene, it's kind of a waste, kind of a crime not to, you know, cover that in some way, shape, or form. So that kind of informs where I'm going. But when I get to do a part 2, then people who had said, well, you only did North American films and mostly American films in part 1. What's the deal? There's a whole world out there. I'm like, I know, but there's so many movies. Oh, but we're in part 2 now. So listen, if I want to do a whole thing on Italian horror and, you know, Fulci and Argento and everyone in between, now I could do that. You know, now I can get to more of the deep cuts. Now I can start looking at those straight to video curiosities that not everybody knows about, you know, but I still have a lot of leftover of the heavy hitters. So the balance has ultimately led to kind of the ultimate prize, which is In Search of Darkness Part 3, because that was something that not only could I be like, all right, now I could get to go to town because I know this audience is invested in these titles, you know, the crazy ones, the really crazy ones. But on top of that, our process in ingratiating our audience and your voices in what you want to see and involving you and asking you outright, you know, polling you, you know, write in what are the titles you want to, you know, that ended up in a movie where sure, I made the ultimate choices and a lot of things were sort of a priority based on the talent I had in front of camera, but I in essence didn't choose any of those movies. You guys did. And if anything, my biggest struggle was like, oh, I'm still going to get some of the movies that I even want. It's not going to make it. Like I want Brain Damage in this movie, and I so badly wanted to put it in there, but I just could not fit it in just due to the demands and the crowd at the door, so to speak.
Go ahead, Chad. I'm sorry.
When, you know, with the first one, because you said you didn't know if there'd be a second one, obviously you would hope for one. Is there a movie that didn't make it in the first one that you were like, oh, I'm so angry. I really wish after the fact that I would have got that movie into the first documentary?
Humanoids from the Deep.
What a weird, great one. I love that movie.
Well, collectively, as you guys know, and the reason why so many people love these movies is because we all have our personal favorites that meant something to us when we saw it for the first time, you know, and that's what these movies, if you boil it down for all the other reasons, I think it's all about what you connect with and what you will defend to your dying day, because it's important to you. So for me, you know, like Humanoids from the Deep, that's when my friend who had cable, who I didn't have, I didn't have cable. My friend had cable. His parents were out for the afternoon. What's on TV that's rated R? What does it say? Nudity and violence. This one, Humanoids from the Deep. Really, that's a crappy title. Let's watch. You know,
sea monsters coming to shore to score. Man, what are you doing?
Delivered on all cylinders, and to this and scared and ended with the ultimate like jump scare.
Yeah,
and that to me is sort of like the perfect example of the type of film that, at least for me, that's a must. You know, I had to include that. I just had to do it. You know, is that anyone else's favorite? Maybe not. Is it offensive? Arguably, most likely. Yes. Definitely. Are you going to be canceled talking about it like you were talking about for Dress to Kill? Possibly. Possibly, because there's stuff that I don't recommend you put in movies these days, but that movie is important to me for my own personal nostalgic reasons, and so there's many more, but that was definitely one that I wanted in part 1. But listen, I'm the guy who I make the final decisions, and I couldn't even satisfy myself.
Oh yeah,
right.
But that brings up such an interesting part. What I think is so fun about the In Search of Darkness experience. Something that we've been doing is, as we're watching these movies, some of them are going to be new to us, some of them are going to be things we watched 20 years ago, but it also gives us an opportunity to sort of watch this movie from the lens of not only how much cinema has changed, but what cinema was at the time. Even when we were discussing Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill, there are so many products of the 1970s in the way he's shooting, and then still he's even trying to go for a Hitchcock feel throughout the entire thing, and then put in some of those more modern elements at the time.
Mhm.
And so it feels, as you go through, that you're seeing the progress of filmmaking unfurl in this timeline, the way you've coordinated it, right? And it also seems that this project is a perfect progress of your career, from being, obsessed with the horror films, working for horror film magazines, that journalistic aspect, all the film stuff. It seems like it all came together in such a kismet of a way. Do you, now that the third one is done, which also what made you decide to cap the 80s at the third one, and like, do you feel relieved? Do you feel like this is a magnum opus, or are you just excited to go to the next thing? How do you feel?
Lots to unpack with that wonderful question. One, I don't think that if I had tried to make this movie even a decade ago, I would have necessarily been prepared properly to do it.
Yeah.
I had to have cut my teeth on the rigorous working in the trenches at Entertainment Tonight. And that sounds like it's tongue in cheek, but it's not. It's really intense there. And to be able to get to do what you want to do amid all the tabloid, breaking news, award shows, celebrity deaths and DUIs and weddings, all that stuff like that, to be able to do set visits, or, like I chose to and got to go to the set of Burying the Ex, Joe Dante's
Oh,
Burying
yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
Ex. And E.T. couldn't care less about that, But Ashley Greene was on there, and she was big from Twilight, so they're like, yeah, cover it, And it's ironic, and I'm obviously hitting a tangent here, but it was awesome because I got to hang out with Joe Dante,
Which is amazing.
and the late great Anton Yelchin. But also talking with Ashley, I couldn't talk to her on camera because she was at like late stage dead zombie makeup. And they said, we could talk, but I can't do it on camera because they don't want to reveal, this final stage look. So here I am just chatting with her, and it was a great interview, but I just remember thinking to myself, like, I'm talking to a dead person right now. I got to remind myself, But I couldn't have done In Search of Darkness earlier. I needed to cut my teeth at Entertainment Tonight. I really needed to hone and fine tune my editorial instincts, running the show, so to speak, with Famous Monsters. And so the timing couldn't have been better. And frankly, the way my life is, the flexibility of my schedule, like, listen, I think it's obvious that we work kind of hard on these movies. But I get to work with a team that's in the UK. We use the 8-hour time differential to our advantage. And I have the flexibility where I could pick up my kid from school and drop him off and go to soccer practice and still make a movie and have stars in my backyard during the pandemic. And, that's super cool too. I think I forgot the rest of your question, but that's kind of like that. I think it's all kind of been leading up to this, and I wouldn't trade it for anything else as what I'm doing now. Versus, but the rest of your question was like, am I basking in the finality of the trilogy? Is it really the end of the 80s? Am I chomping at the bit to do 90s? Yes, all of the above. 80s, we've got so much material that still hasn't made it into the movie, the trilogy, that we can easily do more. And I know Robin wants to do more with 80s horror in some way, shape, or form. I don't even know that is going to be, because we have our eyes set on 90s next. There's been a real clamor for 90s horror. and people are very excited about it, and I'm very excited about it too. So that's really essentially next. But like I said, I've got In Search of Tomorrow Part 2 as well, which will be very cool because that'll be sort of a deeper dive into more of the cult and video releases and all the, we did the heavy hitters in the first one. So this time I get to really sort of spread my wings a little more within the genre, which will be very
awesome.
Cool. Quick aside with that one is that you guys, anyone who wants to contribute your thoughts and your opinions, we're doing a fan consultation as we speak. So people could go to 80s Horror Doc. If you go to the socials, there's a link tree there, or you could go to I think you go to creatorvc.com and there's a link for In Search of Tomorrow. But basically there's a click, you click to a survey that you could fill out, where you could say all the things that you'd like to see in Search of Tomorrow Part 2. And I have a synopsis which has about 20 chapters that we can't all fit in. And we are inviting everyone to share their ideas, encourage details within those chapters, suggest other things as well. And that ultimately will tell us what you guys want. And it helps me hone the material, because I know what I want, but I really want everyone to have not only the satisfaction of a deeper dive in the 80s, but feeling like they're connected, with these projects, because it really is all about fan service from fans.
And I love that collaborative aspect of it. That's awesome. And how much you put into the weight of what the fans want. Also, as of right now, there's a flash sale of all 3 docs of In Search of Darkness available at the 80s Doc website. So we encourage all of our listeners to go check that out.
Yep, 80shorrordoc.com, flash sale from now until April 11th.
Awesome.
And you can get In Search of Darkness 3, but if you didn't get Part 1 or Part 2, you could buy the whole trilogy and a cool box set. Check it out. Go to 80shorrordoc.com and 80s Horror Doc socials. All right, I won't plug anymore.
No,
but it's very cool because sorry, just to add one more thing to it is streaming will come and go. A lot of people have seen this on Shudder, and I love that fact that we've had such a amazing audience. But things come and go, and if you have it on your shelf, it's much more permanent. And that's all I could say, especially in I was just saying the other day that I was struggling to find the movie Prey, the Predator prequel, the Predator sequel. And it sucks because I don't want to have to, I saw it the first day it was on Hulu, but I don't keep Hulu. So if I wanted to see it again, it wasn't on iTunes, no physical copy of it. And if I want to see it, I have to, pay to subscribe to Hulu again. Yeah. So there's something to be said for having this stuff on your shelf.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of your audience for In Search of Darkness probably likes to have physical material and physical DVDs. I know I'm one of those. Well, I
was going to say, Keith, you're crazy about it because what Keith does is he has all of the Hellraisers. He's like, it really fell off after number 5. I can't stand it after that, but I'm going to own all of them. He's got to have
the completionist.
The completist. Exactly. Yeah.
That's why we're watching every movie in Search of Darkness. We're trying to anyway.
That's another one too, is the Hellraiser movie. You can't get that because that's the Hulu as well. So
Disney keeping that tight grip on it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're running out of time, but I have 3 quick questions for you that are the standards that people probably ask you all the time. I want to know your favorite horror film, your least favorite horror film, and a horror film that you are looking forward to.
American Werewolf in London, American Werewolf in Paris, and most looking forward to The Boogeyman looks fun.
Yeah, it does.
I love Stephen King. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. What is coming up? I'm very myopic right now. I can't see beyond like Indiana Jones.
Yeah, the Dial of Destiny all the way. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
So I'm sure if I had a list in front of me, like, oh yeah, of course that. Oh, I can't wait for that. But my mind's a blank right now. But I keep on seeing that trailer for The Boogeyman. I'm the guy who my job used to be to dissect the trailer, dissect the teaser for the trailer, for the trailer, for the teaser, all that stuff like that, to the point where when I finally got to see the movie, there were like so few surprises.
Yeah.
If not a little frustration, because half the stuff in the trailer wasn't in the final cut. And, which is kind of good, because they're like, all right, well, we didn't tease it because it's not in the movie, but you spend the movie expecting, well, wait, they didn't have the part where Michael Myers does a song and dance. Why isn't it in there? I every time I see trailers now, I kind of go la 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 la. I close my eyes because I don't want any spoilers anymore. So the Boogeyman, I haven't even seen beyond the first 30 seconds, and I love it. It makes me think of early Stephen King and my love for Stephen King, and reading Night Shift, and his various different season, his various Skeleton Crew, his short story books are just as great as his 1,000-page opuses. And so, and
some would argue better. He has so much character in his writing, especially in those short story things. I think you can never go wrong with the King. That's a great pick.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, thank you,
David. It has been an honor and a pleasure, and thank you for making the next 10 years of our lives being watching horror movies.
Oh, hey, everyone should go to, for the flash sale, 80shorrordoc.com. Once you're on that page, you scroll down, there's a checklist. On the checklist, we have put together a nice looking PDF. Clayton Benge, who does all our posters, he put a PDF together of every single film that we cover, the main films through each deck, every year, 80 to 89, for part 1, for part 2, for part 3, #ISOD challenge. And you should take the challenge, download the PDF, check them off as you go, check them off what you've seen, share the wealth, talk about the movies that you love.
We will
connected with your podcast. But that's the biggest request we've had, is like, where's the list? So
that's
we're finally obliging.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for obliging us with your time and for your films and for all your work. And we wish you the best. Can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much, guys. Great questions. And I'm really enjoying your podcast, and don't get yourself canceled.
Thanks. We'll try. We'll try.
No, you guys wouldn't, and I know you wouldn't, but I really appreciate your time, and thanks a lot. And it's a pleasure chatting with you guys.
Thank you too, David.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Fred. All right, so then we'll do that, and then let's do an outro, I guess.
Yeah.
God, we were so sexy during that interview.
I just know I talked way too much.
I love that Fangoria shirt. That's awesome. What's on your shirt?
Yeah, it's Fangoria. It's just
okay.
Regular old Fangoria.
Oh, fuck yeah. That's awesome. That's super cool. Yeah, I think that went well. I think nice.
He didn't mention it. He didn't mention the shirt.
He didn't at all. But he's from Famous Monsters, so he was like the opposite. You know what I mean?
I know. I was thinking like he's either gonna like be mad that I'm wearing this, or he's gonna appreciate it. But it was nothing.
You were repping the wrong color, so he just ignored you. I think he called you Chuck a couple of times just to drive it home.
I think so. Yep.
But I thought it went well. I think he looks like a variant of John Oliver, but like got a stable job. You know what I mean? And that's awesome.
Great guy, though.
Great guy. Great guy.
He's awesome.
Insightful stuff. I can't wait. Go check out all the shit that he plugged. 80shorrordoc.com, I think, was the website. And go check out. And did you write it down? I should have wrote it down.
Yeah. 80shorrordoc.com, and 80s is 80. And again, they're having that flash sale through April 11th. So go pick up your physical media copies of In Search of Darkness.
Yep.
We cannot praise the documentary enough. Again, that's why we're doing this podcast.
And when you get there, tell them Not Quite Darkness sent you. It won't do anything for it. You won't get any money off. It's still, it'll be fun. I don't know. Next time we're going to be back with The Fog, and I've clearly got like post-interview fog. I'm like, I need a sandwich to break down. But Chad, where can the people find you?
You can find the podcast on Twitter, NQC Podcast, and Instagram, NQC Podcast.
And if you're looking for me, you can find me in the Not Quite Darkness.
Peace.
Michael K.